Similar to the way we mentioned during Tactics Ogre Let's Clang Together, let's do a quick shout out to how cool a title gets if you add the word unleashed to it.
True.
Shift to unleashed.
Yes.
And of course Need for Speed Shift was the kind of simulation version of Need for Speed. And as someone who can only play arcade racers, what's the simulation deal? What's this all about?
What simulation racing seems to have evolved into on the consoles is car games that is more about driving a car a proper way, like knowing how to drive in the corners, how to speed down, how to speed up, and everything, and also.
Where's the fun in that?
Just learning about the cars and what you can actually do in the individual cars, and Shift 2 definitely is that kind of game.
Okay, is it kind of like a EA's answer to Gran Turismo?
Well, if Gran Turismo is considered a simulation, sure.
I wouldn't
just let that.
Okay, but that's light. Okay, forget that question. But does Shift 2 Unleashed do a good job of that?
Sort of. I really the first game I really wanted to love the first game because the first game in the Shift series did so many things right. For instance, the whole feeling of being in the cockpit of the car and just, you know, going at screaming insane speeds on straights on tracks like Donington and everything was really, really cool. It had a lot of faults as well, and that unfortunately can be said about the sequel as well. I still love like tuning the game to the way I want to play it and just selecting my favorite tracks, but everything else is kind of messy.
Okay, but so let's start with the good parts.
Yeah, well, the good parts, the first thing you'll notice if you play the first game is that they have certainly done a much better job of the car physics this time around, so that you actually have a way better feeling of the cars and the weight of the individual cars when you drive them. And that is alpha omega in the car game. You have to be able to feel the car. For instance, if you go into a really heavy car or in a small racing car like a Caterhammer or something like that, that is basically just wheels with a very big engine. You have to be able to just feel the difference in weight and how you're supposed to control the cars. And Shift 2 does a much better job of that. And it's really so obvious from the very first time you get into a car, which in this game is a Nissan GTR. It has this way of the first time you start up the game, you actually put directly into a race so that it can find out how good you are at the game, and it can kind of suit the whole package to your needs.
Okay, so it will just judge me if you suck.
Yes.
Play Mario Kart. Okay, messy parts.
It almost seems like the whole game is held together like by a piece of string. I mean, the menus are horrendous. The career mode is just, you know, like it's done without any sort of imagination at all. It's just a series of, or like a bunch of races divided into XP levels and everything in between that you know from these kinds of games. And it's so unimaginative. You just, I mean, when you've raced like 5 races in the game, you almost can see how the rest of the game will just partake. And it's so I wouldn't call it boring, but it's just, it lacks the surprises. It lacks the certain hook, because suddenly the hook itself is just unlocking the cars that I want to drive in, and that is pretty easily done. So when I have done that, there really isn't a lot to keep me hooked in the game. Also, completely mind-blowing is that from the very start of the game, you can only race in the cars that you have unlocked yourself. So that means if you're a new drive or just a new gamer to this sort of game, you can't just buy the game and you expect to go out racing in a Caterham or GTR or anything. You have to unlock those cars, and that is kind of a dead sin in this kind of game.
Okay, so at least it's an improvement over the first Shift, but they still, even though it's been unleashed, they haven't really reached.
It is a far better game than the first game. I really believe it is, not the least due to, for instance, one of the new things is that they have added this helmet cam where you actually watch the car and the track and everything from the eyes of the driver, which gives a whole different feeling. And yes, it's not something that you'll be able to use if you want to put down the best lap times, but it certainly makes it much more Hollywood spectacular.
But would you recommend, you're obviously a racing man, would you recommend it to racing fans?
Yes, but everyone who buys this game should know that this is for sure a game that is much more enjoyable if you are willing to go in and put together your own races. I mean, you have to play to unlock all these cars and everything, and of course there is also the amazing helmet cam where you watch it from the eyes of the driver to experience, and it really is sort of cool because it's something new in this kind of game. But by far the best experiences I had with the game was when I had unlocked everything, I had unlocked the tracks, I had done everything, and I had gained the experience to actually be able to go in and tune the cars to feel the way I wanted to feel, and then just set up my own races with all sorts of cars on track, the car I want to drive, and just go crazy. That is by far the most fun I've had, because the carrier mode and everything in between is just kind of weak and kind of messy all around. And also, it should be said, the PC version, from what I've played of it, is so far just unplayable compared to the console versions, and that comes as quite a surprise.